Day 1 of Origins, Dane and I got there a little early, so we grabbed an empty table, sat down, and enjoyed a couple games of Trails. Next, we head over to the Queen Games booth, and we were lucky enough to play a prototype of a new game called Propeller Island, and it is a tile drafting, tableau building, kind of engine building game. You draft little tiles, put meeples on them, and you can activate the meeples. And when you draft a dice, you can either choose to take that tile or activate meeples on tiles that you already have that matching die result on them. And you're trying to fulfill cards, which basically take the resources that you get from those tiles that you have. But we soon worked up quite an appetite and decided to walk past the Arnold statue on our way to the North Market, which has some amazing food at it. And in this video, you can see how amazing the landscape of Columbus, Ohio is, with all the pylons and cones everywhere, and there's always construction. But in the North Market, there's always cool air, no pylons, and tons of delicious food to explore. And we headed to my favorite fried chicken place in the whole world, and that is Hot Chicken Takeover. Kind of an interesting time because usually around lunchtime, especially during Origins, this place is absolutely packed. Needless to say, we got some hot chicken and sat down and smashed it. Then back to the convention hall, and a few publishers already have booths set up, such as Queen Games and Allplay. And then Dane and I traveled over to the games library and we picked out Deep Regrets. And we played that a couple times, and that was very enjoyable. A lot of luck going on in this game, but if you don't mind games that have luck because there's rolling dice and blindly drawing cards, it was a lot of fun. And the aesthetics of the game are absolutely amazing, and the production quality is super rad. Next, we played Redwood, and Redwood is a very unique game. You play as photographers trying to take the best snapshot that you can, but you use these weird plastic stencil thingies to move around the board and to take your snapshot. But here's the kicker though, you're not allowed to hold them up to your pieces and kind of figure out exactly what you want to do. You just gotta eyeball it. So there's definitely a skill and an art to it, and it was super unique. I can't really think of any other game like it.
Oh my gosh, it's not long enough at all.
Oh, I hate to see it.
Like I can't remove it, right? I have to leave it there?
Yes.
This sucks.
Super cool game. And at this point, this is Wednesday morning. It's starting to fill in a little bit, but not too many people here at Origins. Still really easy to find an empty table and to get your game on. Next, we went back to the library and checked out Moon Colony Bloodbath. And this game was an absolute blast. I'm definitely gonna have to pick up a copy of this one. I just love the old school sci-fi aesthetic of it. And the gameplay is really interesting. Players build and share a combined deck. It's kind of like a deck builder, but everyone's building the same deck, and then everyone has to use that deck, and basically just get destroyed the whole time. It's crazy. Next, we checked out Ruins by Allplay, and it is a hand shedding game. So you're trying to get rid of the cards in your hand, and you're trying to create sets, but the cards are clear, and you can add cards to change what your hand is. So if you had a 4 and a 6, but you had a +2 card, you could slide that in, and boom, now you have 2 6s. Really cool. Next, we went back into the vendor hall, and then we checked out Confusing Lands, and we ran into Superman. He's not Superman. Anyways, we played a game of Confusing Lands, and it was a really cool, like, drafting tile game. Actually, they're not really tiles, but they're cards, but there's some interesting decisions to be made because the cards have basically 6 squares on them, and one side has a scoring condition and the other side does not, and you gotta choose, do I want to use this card for the pieces on there to score, or do I want to use the scoring condition, but I'm not gonna get as many scoring elements. Next, we went over to the Allplay booth and tried out Wordsy. It was a pretty cool word game, and usually I'm not a fan of word games, but this is one that I would play again. I won't play Scrabble, but I play Wordsy. Next, we went over to the next table and checked out Vegas Strip. Vegas Strip was a pretty rad kind of bluffing area control game with a team play element to it, which actually worked out a lot better than I thought it would. It was a good time. And then next we went over to Capstone Games and we rocked a game of Galileo Galilei, and it was freaking rad. It's like an action selection game, but you can upgrade your actions and you use those actions to get dice and you increase the value of the dice. Just a whole lot going on in this game, but it feels sort of streamlined, like not too much bloat. really dope. And then next we tried out Enkina Shuffle, I don't know how to say it. Anyways, you're these animals and you carry bugs on your back and you try to get the bugs to your matching colored stumps. And basically you're in everyone's way and you can move anyone's animals. They don't really belong to anyone, but it's just basically a big traffic jam and you screw over your friends. In this picture, can you tell who's the player that's getting screwed over? Yeah, me. And then next we went and checked out Pina Colada Dice. It was a kind of a dice chucking area control game. You're trying to control these different areas that are worth points by rolling dice and matching the combinations of dice on the tiles. It looked great, it played fast, it was a good time. Next we went over to Bezier and we checked out Rebel Princess. Been hearing a lot of great things about this one and it did deliver. It was an interesting take on a trick-taking game. Kinda almost like you want to lose most of the hands because you don't want to get the skulls on the cards. Anywho, back to the gaming library and we checked out Cursed Court. I had seen this one around for ages and I love the aesthetic of it and never got a chance to play it. And I was super stoked to finally get to play this game and it did not disappoint. It was a really cool game. And then there's this weird creepy looking guy who looks really gropey. Yeah. And then we checked out 3, 2, 1 Countdown because Grandpa Beck, he makes some dope games. I mean, they're really simple games, but they're always fun and the quality of the cards are always great. And I love the retro space aesthetic on this game. Super fun, super great game. Got a review of that coming soon. And then in the gaming library, I picked up a copy of Grog Island off of somebody in the virtual flea market and we played that. It was a really different kind of bidding game. You're bidding on different territories with dice. A lot of weird restrictions in the game, but it was an interesting game. Then we went back over to the All Play booth and got to check out some new games they have coming out soon. One of them was Waddle, and it is kind of like an area control game where you're placing your penguins on a board trying to get the most penguins around an area, and you'll score points for that. But the turn order is really interesting in this game because you take your marble and you either put it back at the top of the slide of the side that you're on, or you can not place a penguin on the board and move your marble over to the other slide. So that way when the active spot that you're able to place penguins on moves, you will have first dibs on the new spot. And then I got to check out Twinkle Twinkle by All Play. And it is a tile drafting game where you're connecting constellations and it has these amazing clear acrylic tiles. And then we went back into the gaming hall and played a game of Las Vegas. And Las Vegas is an older game, but it's one of my favorite games, one of my favorite light games, and it's just a good time. It was a great way to wrap up the evening. And then we move on to day 3. And then outside of the convention hall is this bro here that feels way too comfortable in his robe. Anyways, down the escalator we go and then past the welcome area for Origins. And I'm not sure if you can tell from the video, but people are starting to file in a little bit more here on Friday, and then we have weird face thing at the convention center. But anyways, next we make our way over to Arcane Wonders, and we tried Cat Tower, which is a cooperative dexterity game that has a pretty in-depth story about a cat whose mother tragically passed away. I'm not making that up. That is legit the story about this game. And I know when I heard the idea of co-op dexterity game, I wasn't the most interested in it. However, I gave it a try and it was actually a lot of fun. It was really cool, and it's super difficult because all the pieces that you're stacking, they're all different shapes and sizes. So 2 of the walls won't be the same side, so you never really have a flat ground to work on, and you're trying to stack these cats on top. Next, we played a game called Number Chain. And it was a very interesting, entertaining card game where you're trying to shed your hand of cards. When you play them, they have to make a chain in the numbers. So you could chain a 13, and since 13 ends in a 3 with a, say, 36. It was really interesting. And here's an amazing rear end and some fashionable cargo pants. Next, we visited the KTBG booth and played Maki Masters, which was pretty interesting. You are placing these ingredients on the table trying to make the most dope sushi for a lot of points. So everyone's placing these ingredients together, however you are trying to score the cards that you have in your hand and not try to help out others too much. And there are also some upgrade cards to kind of mix things up a little bit. And then next we played Nata Toradori, I think it was, and this was an excellent hand shedding game. Seems like this was the year for hand shedding games, but you are trying to get rid of the cards in your hand and you can play combinations that you have in your hand, and you have to play more cards than the previous player. So if the previous player plays 2 2s, then you could play like 2 3s. But what's interesting though is the hand that you beat, those cards, you can add them into your hand and you can add them anywhere in your hand. I failed to mention that in this game, you are not allowed to organize the cards in your hand. And next we bumped into some game called Buccaneer Bones, and basically it was kind of like Shut the Box. Very accessible and you could probably get anyone to play it. Next we played Pirate Blast, and it is a solid kids game where you draw a card and you attack each other's ships. Next we played Molly House, which was a very different kind of game. I can't think of any other game that plays this way. Players are kind of collectively building like a poker hand when someone decides to throw like a soiree or a party, but it's not a co-op game though. You are trying to score the most points. The players that contributed the most to that poker hand, they will score their card. Next was Positano, and it is a bidding game with amazing table presence, as you can see from this photo, and you are bidding on things such as how high you can build buildings, or what plot you're building buildings, or the materials for buildings. Super fun and interesting and different bidding game. And next we played Pillage the Village, was just a dice chucking take that game, trying to get the most loot, stealing loot, pure chaos. And then next we tried Panda Royale. Panda Royale is kind of like a good version of Yahtzee, if you will. Players roll dice and you're actually kind of building your dice pool. Draft the dice at the beginning of each round and the different dice do different things. It was just an interesting dice chucking game. I enjoyed that one, and Dane really enjoyed that one. Next we went back to the library and tried Cretaceous Rails. It was a very, well, as you can see from this picture, beautiful and colorful game with kind of a train feel where you're building routes, but then you're picking up different visitors and any non-obstructed views of dinosaurs of that matching villager's colors will give you points on that safari that they took. But you also use those villagers to build buildings, but you can also trap dinosaurs too, because some buildings you'll need to turn in dinosaurs to build these buildings. And cool mixture of a few different mechanics. Really looking forward to playing this weekend. And now we are on day 4. Saturday morning was the madness that they call the virtual flea market, which is really cool actually. It's kind of a pain in the rear, but on Board Game Geek there is a thread where you can list and sell all your games that you're not currently playing. So that was a cool way to make some extra cash and pick up some new games on the cheap. Does anybody want to buy my copy of Bad Maps? And next we got a chance to check out Dragon Dice, and it is kind of like a 2-player skirmish type game with these really nice chunky custom dice. Players are essentially trying to control 3 different areas or theaters of war, whatever you want to call them. But players will be rolling dice, performing magic spells to alter the other player's armies, to attack their armies. You get saving throws, all kinds of stuff. It was really cool. I enjoyed it. Next, we went over to the 25th Century booth and we got to play Stargazers. And I think this one is coming to Kickstarter soon. And as you can probably tell from these photos, this game is absolutely amazing looking. It's a tile drafting game with 2 elements to it. So you're drafting like a tile and then you're also drafting an element that goes in the middle of it. And there are scoring cards that you're trying to complete, and the tiles just look absolutely amazing. They're like multi-layer acrylic. Next, we just scooched over a table at the 25th Century booth and we played La Habana. And it was a very different feeling bidding game where players have matching decks of action cards, and players will play these action cards to do things such as steal materials from other players, or to get builders to help build, or get the materials to build. But you play 2 of these cards at once, and the value of those 2 cards will become your drafting order. It was really interesting card play. And we went back to the Envy Board Games booth and checked out Meerkat Kingdoms. And this one has fabulous little Meerkat Meeples. And it was a pretty fun game. You chuck dice and then you take 2 of those dice, and the sum of those dice will be a location on the map. And the third die will dictate how many Meerkats you can put on that space. So you roll the dice, you choose which location, and then how many Meerkats you're going to put there. But then some of the spaces also have special abilities that can do things such as move Meerkats or remove Meerkats. But then there's also like a male Meerkat that will, I guess, thematically knock up your Meerkats, giving you pups, and you can get extra points for your little pups that you have at the end of the game. Really excited for this one to come out. And then it was time to go back to Hot Chicken Takeover again, and it was a little busier this time, so we had to wait on our food, so why not play a game of 3, 2, 1 countdown? And then I realized I had a bunch of crumbs in my badge sleeve, and Mark thought that was pretty gross. And then back to the gaming hall, and then we played my new copy of Craftwagon, and it's just so gorgeous. Look at it. It's way more pretty than my old blue one. Basically, in this game, you are using a rondelle system to take different actions, and with these actions, you're getting cars, you're getting technologies to be able to build better cars and build better engines, and then you're trying to manipulate the market. Well, not really manipulate the market, but control the market by choosing what kind of clientele you're looking for. And then, as you can tell, the gaming hall is starting to fill up by now, and it's actually becoming kind of difficult to find a table. So, yeah. And then from the library, we checked out Loot and played it, and it was cool, and I forgot to take any pictures of it. And then we played Dice Veggie. And Dice Veggies is an interesting drafting game where you roll the dice and you use this tool to kind of square them up, but then you use a little cleaver to cut off the pieces that you want. And you can take anything you want as long as the pips don't exceed a value of 10. And you're using those ingredients to try to complete your ingredient cards, but there are also like flavor cards or pizzazz cards, or I forget what they're called, but they can give you bonus points if you meet the requirements on them when cooking a dish. Back to the library, and I checked out Fruit Fight, and this was a hilarious push your luck card matching game. Basically, you're just flipping over cards, and if you get 2 matching fruits, you bust and you get nothing. However, if you flip over cards, you can steal the matching cards from anyone at the table, because the cards that you gain aren't yours until the beginning of your turn. Next, we played a quick game of Ghost of Christmas, and it is a very bizarre trick-taking game where you play cards kind of in like 3 different times, the future, past, and present, and it is just really different. It's really actually hard to wrap your head around the first time you play it, so it warrants multiple plays. And then next we checked out Fives, and Fives was a kind of a surprise to me. I didn't know anything about it. I just grabbed it because it had this ugly pink box, and then we played it, and it was actually a really neat trick-taking game. Highly recommend giving this one a try. And then that brings us to day 5. The final day of Origins. We checked out this game called Tailor Master. It's kind of a race. You have these neat little acrylic stencils, and you're trying to complete the cards fastest. So one player will flip over a card, and then you're trying to find that matching combination of colors on your board. Next, back over to the 25th Century game to check out the Yellow House. And the Yellow House is a 2-player kind of trick-taking-ish game. Every time you play a card, you can discard a card to increase that card color's value. So you're like discarding cards to increase the card's value, but you could also be making the card stronger for your opponent later on. Thematically, you're arguing about art and what is most important. And then we moved a table over to 25th Century booth to play Red Letter, Yellow Letter. And this was actually a really fun party game by the same designer as Green Team Wins. Actually a lot of fun. As you can tell from this picture, we had an absolute blast playing it with the designer. And then we went over to the Hachette booth and played In the Footsteps of Mary Curie. And this weird cube tower thing is kind of why I wanted to try it out. It caught my eye, and it was very cool gameplay. You dump these cubes down there and you draft them. You use those cubes to get books, but you can only hold so many cubes, so you have to get beakers and such to be able to hold more cubes or draft more cubes. Basically a bunch of different ways to score little points throughout the game. It was a lot of fun. Enjoyed this one. I look forward to playing that one again. And then next we checked out Paraphrase Songs in Other Words. It's a party game where you have to guess the song title, but it's like paraphrased and it's in other words. So basically I just said the title, but I guess you can figure out what the game is by the title. And that was a lot of fun. And that are all the games that we played at Origins this year in 2025.